Then there's ages 2, or I'm off on this. I'm going to have to give you one or the other here, whether to go by the book or by my slides. The book says 18 months to 6 years. I have 2 to 7 on this one. Pre-operational stage, they start developing language. Now they start jabbering before then and maybe using a few words. They generally will, but they actually start to really talk, okay, early in this development. And then obviously after age 7, they're talking and you can't stop them, okay. And so a child develops language and they become very egocentric. Now I think they become egocentric earlier than 2, but anyway, they're very, life revolves around them. It's what they want, it's their toy. You know, you watch them, almost every child goes through a stage where they don't want to share anything. Okay? And if another child wants it, you know, it's mine, I want it. And so there's a second stage later on, we'll see, where they talk about it being a second egocentric stage. Okay. Then the next one is concrete operational. So you have sensory motor, where your senses and your motor skills are developing. Pre-operational is going through this cognitive development, making sense of things, language, but it's still not fully functioning like you can. Is kind of why I think they call it pre-operational. Concrete operational is when you're getting the what we call concrete learning down pat. 2 + 2 = 4. That's pretty concrete. That's not abstract, at least not in most educational systems. Okay? And so in this concrete operational stage, they begin logical operations. They place objects into order, you know, small to large, first to last. I think they start that earlier than that, but anyway, this is the stage Piaget put them in. They understand conservation. The amount of substance is unchanged, even if the shape is different. You can see that if you have your books on page 177. There's a tall, skinny test tube and then a short, squat one, and they can understand that it could be the same amount of liquid in each of those, even though their shapes so differently. And but their reasoning is still what we would call concrete or black and white. It's either this way or this way. There's not a lot of abstract reasoning. Okay, that comes with the formal operational. They begin to think abstractly. And the book just says 11 to 12 years. I've got 11 to 15. They move toward this abstract thinking. They can test an hypothesis. In other words, if there's this idea, you know, is this true? They can test that at this point. They can reason this out enough to say, no, that's really not true because, or that is true because, and give you the evidence as to why they believe it's true. Right or not, they can do that process. Okay? And so that's the formal operational stage where they can test a hypothesis. They can also solve problems just logically. You know, 2 + 2, you memorize that, it's 4. But here you can logically sort through a problem and come to an answer that isn't that clear and that objective. Okay, this is subjective or abstract thinking. You can think something through. Okay, pretty important that children go through these stages, right? And if you never got to where you could think abstractly and reason things out, that's pretty sad. And some people seem like they have stopped short of this stage. Then the other next one, and maybe the last one we'll deal with, is Kohlberg's moral development stages. And this one I find quite interesting. How does a child develop morally? Not just cognitively here, and not just their sensory motor skills and their emotional development, but how do they develop morally? And the level 1, and all of these have 2 steps in each level. Level 1 is pre-conventional, also called pre-moral, where punishment and obedience is the thing. You know, what does a child respond to? Punishment, They obey rules to avoid punishment. Later on in that stage, they tend to start looking to do things because of the reward or the pleasure. Oh, good kid, and they like to hear that. So, okay, I'll do that again. As opposed to, you're going to get a spanking if you do this, okay? Which I know is child abuse, but nonetheless. Level 2 is conventional role conformity, society determines morals. This is what they call the good boy, good girl. They conform to avoid disapproval. Is step 1, or actually it's step 3 here, but it's the first step of this level. Where they want to conform so they don't get condemned. Now you can also see how peer pressure can start affecting people here. Well, I want to do what makes everybody around me happy. I want to do what makes my fellow students in school happier than other neighborhood kids happy. Well, it might not be a good thing. Okay? And it's very important that parents and churches have really good relationships and influences on the kids during this time, because whose approval do you want them to seek? Okay, you want them to want to prevent, I guess, at this stage, your disapproval. Okay?
What ages?
In Kohlberg, he doesn't really give ages too much. He just says everybody has to develop through these stages, and that some people get locked into these early stages.
Okay.
He says you don't necessarily graduate through all of these stages. So there can be adults living in this conventional stage. There's probably even a few living in the pre-conventional stage. He actually says most people live in the conventional stage. They never get past the point where it's what other people think that matters. You think about that in our society. Why do we influence each other so much? Why does society determine what's morally right? Because people live in the conventional stage. The step 4 is law and authority, maintaining morality. They conform to avoid censure, which is very similar to the first one. It's just that it's more official. They don't want the law to tell them what to do. Jessica?
Is it possible to be in both stages at the same time?
Don't know for sure, but I think he would say no. I think he would think that you would probably move from one to the other. As far as Kohlberg, in reality, I guess you could be affected by both. But you probably tend to live in, what's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, personally, I tend to, I don't know, I tend to act for favor of other people, but I also, I don't know, I'm not sure, I tend to be in both.
Maybe it depends on what is the bigger motivation. Maybe we're motivated, nobody wants to be punished. That's the first stage. Anybody here want to be punished? You do, come to counseling. But nobody really wants to be. So in that sense, we all have some influence by that, but it probably isn't the main motivator for everybody. It's just punishment. Maybe that's the way to think of it.
Does this work like Maslow's? Like, if for some reason you normally function in level 2, but for whatever reason your level 2 function gets impaired, you fall back to level 1?
I don't know. Maybe. I like that answer.
I guess if you look at it that way, in my life, my main objective is to not be condemned by others. But in the same sense, I obey rules to avoid punishment. So it's on equal levels for me because of the way I grew up. Because I live to avoid being punished, not to be condemned by my parents, because I didn't care what my parents thought. They punished too harshly, so I just did it to avoid punishment. And the way I've grown up, I do both equally. I don't want to be punished, but in the same sense, I've realized that I don't want to be condemned either.
I guess I would think, notice I said I guess, so, I would think if you live by the motivation of the conventional stage, you have probably arrived in that stage. If you didn't live to where that's made much difference to you, it's just punishment's all that matters. Whether you're censured or not, then it didn't matter. Then you'd probably be in the first stage. Probably it's not a matter that punishment is irrelevant because we don't want to be punished. It's a matter that you have gotten to the point where it does matter what these others think. Probably, in my mind, that would be getting into the conventional stage. It's a good question. I haven't thought about that. But I think if you get to this level where this matters, you're probably in that stage. At least I think you would probably say that. I'm not an authority on Colbert, but I'll speak for him today. Good thinking. Anything else on that? His level 3 is post-conventional. And this is where you have self-accepted moral principles. Okay? And you conform to maintain community welfare. In other words, you kind of buy into the community moral view. Okay? And step 6 is where you have these personally accepted moral issues, moral values that you've accepted. It's me, not society, that's making the decisions. I've internalized my morals, my moral values, my faith, and if the rest of you don't like it, I'm really sorry. And Kohlberg would say that not too many people live in that stage. Matter of fact, he actually starts naming some people he thinks lived on this stage. And here's 3 that he suggested.
Okay.
And, you know, he's got a pretty good argument for them. Who cares what society thinks? This is what I believe. Now, some people are going to argue against some of these. But that's kind of how they approach life. And so that's what he calls the post-conventional stage. And he doesn't think a lot of people live there.